Coming home from a combat zone in a wheelchair is a nightmare no soldier ever prepares for. But nothing could have prepared me for the text message my husband sent while I was screaming in pain during physical therapy, trying to move my shattered legs. He told me he was leaving, taking our savings, and moving in with his mistress because he didn't marry a broken woman. He left me completely alone with our 3-month-old son while I literally had to relearn how to take a single step. I fought through the agony for years, built a beautiful life for my boy, and finally found peace. Then, exactly 9 years later, my ex-husband dragged me into a family court, demanding full custody and claiming my military injuries made me a dangerous, unfit mother. He thought he could use my sacrifice to destroy me. He was completely wrong. My name is Maya Thompson, and before my life turned into a courtroom battle, I was a proud Sergeant First Class in the United States Army. I served my country with pride, specialized in logistics, and deployed overseas with a unit I considered family. Back home, I had a husband named Derek. We had been married for 3 years when I found out I was pregnant. Our beautiful son, Liam, was born during a brief leave. But duty called, and when Liam was just 8 weeks old, I had to deploy again. It broke my heart to leave my newborn baby, but Derek held me close and promised he would take perfect care of our son until I returned. I trusted him completely. 6 weeks into my deployment, our convoy was hit by an improvised explosive device. The blast was devastating. I survived, but the shrapnel and structural collapse left me with severe spinal trauma and shattered bones in both of my legs. I woke up in a military hospital in Germany before being flown straight to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Maryland. The doctors were honest but brutal. They told me I had a long, agonizing road ahead of myself, and there was a very real chance I might never walk unassisted again. When Derek first arrived at my bedside, he didn't look like a grieving, supportive husband. He looked absolutely terrified, and not for my safety. He looked at my heavily bandaged legs, the monitors, and the wheelchair in the corner with pure resentment. He had brought 3-month-old Liam with him, and holding my baby boy against my hospital gown was the only thing that kept me breathing. But Derek could barely stand to touch my hand. He left after only 20 minutes, claiming the hospital environment was making Liam nervous. That was the last time he ever showed up voluntarily. A week later, I was transferred to a specialized rehabilitation facility in Ohio to be closer to our home. The routine was brutal. Every morning, physical therapists would lift my dead weight into parallel bars. The pain was an absolute white-hot fire rushing up my spine. I would scream, sweat pouring down my face, tears blinding my eyes, just trying to force my brain to send a signal to my right foot. I was fighting for my life, fighting to be the mother my son deserved. Then came the day that shattered my spirit completely. I was resting in my room after a 4-hour therapy session when my phone buzzed. It was an email from Derek. My hands shook as I opened it. He wrote that he had packed his bags, cleaned out our joint bank accounts containing $45,000, and moved into an apartment with a woman named Jessica, a coworker he had been seeing since I deployed. He stated that he couldn't waste his youth being a full-time nurse to a disabled wife while raising a baby. He left Liam with my elderly mother, took all the money, and vanished. He literally abandoned me at my absolute lowest point. The betrayal was suffocating. I lay in that hospital bed, unable to move my legs, knowing my husband had stolen our life savings to run away with another woman. But looking at the photo of Liam on my bedside table, something inside me changed. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a fierce, burning military rage. I told my therapist, Brenda, to double my sessions. If I had to crawl through fire to get back to my son, I would do exactly that. For the next 8 months, I pushed my body past its human limits. I fell hundreds of times, bruising my knees and arms on the gym floor. But every single time I fell, I pictured Derek's face, and I forced myself back up. Slowly, the nerves began to fire. First a wiggle of the toes, then a slight lift of the ankle. By month 10, I was taking clumsy, trembling steps with a heavy walker. By the end of the year, I walked out of that facility on my own 2 feet, leaning only on a cane. I was medically retired from the Army with full honors, but my true mission was just beginning. I moved into a small, affordable apartment with Liam and my mother. Since Derek had stolen my savings, we had to survive entirely on my military disability compensation and strict budgeting. I poured every ounce of my remaining energy into raising Liam. I became a fixture at his school, volunteered for every field trip, and cooked every meal from scratch. I taught him how to ride a bike, how to throw a baseball, and how to be kind. Despite the permanent limp in my stride and the chronic nerve pain that flared up during rainy days, I gave my son a wonderful, stable life. Derek never called. He never sent a single dollar of child support. He completely erased us from his existence, and honestly, we preferred it that way. 9 years flew by. Liam grew into a bright, funny, straight-A student who wore his mother's old military dog tags with immense pride. We were happy. Then, out of nowhere, the ghost of my past returned to destroy our peace. I was standing in my front yard, helping Liam pack his backpack for soccer practice, when a luxury sedan pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and out stepped Derek. He was dressed in an expensive designer suit, looking wealthy and arrogant. Beside him was Jessica, the mistress, dripping in gold jewelry. Liam didn't even recognize him. Derek walked up to my porch, looked down at my cane with a smirk, and said, "Wow, Maya, you're still limping around, I see. Look at this tiny house. Liam deserves a real family, a wealthy father, and a beautiful home. We are taking him." I told him to get off my property before I called the police. He just laughed, flashed a wicked grin, and handed me a legal folder. He was suing me for sole physical and legal custody of Liam. When my lawyer reviewed the lawsuit, my jaw dropped. Derek had hired a notorious, high-priced family attorney. The paperwork was an absolute character assassination. They argued that because of my severe combat injuries, chronic pain, and diagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder, I was an unstable and physically dangerous parent. They claimed my limp meant I couldn't protect Liam in an emergency and that my military background made me psychologically unfit to raise a child. Even worse, Derek claimed he had been financially supporting us secretly for years, presenting forged cash receipts to make it look like he was a dedicated father. He wanted to rip my 9-year-old son away from the only parent he had ever known, just to fulfill some sick desire for control and to avoid paying future taxes. The day of the custody hearing arrived. The courthouse was cold and intimidating. I sat at the defense table, wearing my best civilian suit, holding my cane firmly. Across the aisle sat Derek and Jessica, whispering giggles with their attorney, looking like they had already won. Liam was sitting in the judge's private chambers, terrified of what would happen to his life. Derek took the stand first. He put on a masterclass in manipulation, squeezing out fake tears for the judge. "Your Honor," Derek sobbed into a handkerchief, "I made a mistake leaving years ago because the trauma of her injuries overwhelmed me. But I have spent 9 years building a multi-million-dollar real estate firm. Maya is a broken veteran. She suffers from severe physical limitations and military PTSD. She lives in a dangerous neighborhood. My son is trapped acting as a caretaker for his disabled mother. For his safety, he needs to live with me in my estate." His lawyer then presented my old, initial medical charts from Walter Reed, highlighting phrases like permanent loss of mobility and severe psychological trauma from combat blast. It looked incredibly bad. My lawyer cross-examined him, pointing out the lack of child support, but Derek smoothly lied, claiming he had given my mother cash envelopes that we conveniently forgot to report. The judge, a stern, older woman named Judge Abigail Vance, sat silently, her expression completely unreadable. When it was my turn, I walked to the witness stand slowly, refusing to let my limp look like a weakness. I stood tall, looked the judge directly in the eye, and spoke with the absolute clarity of a soldier. I detailed every single day of the last 9 years. I explained how I worked through the physical agony to walk again, how I managed my pain safely, and how my military retirement structure fully provided for Liam's education and healthcare. I told the judge that my injuries weren't a symbol of weakness. They were proof that I knew how to survive, protect, and fight for those I loved. But Derek's attorney just smiled, confident that my medical history would legally disqualify me. Judge Vance called for a brief recess to review the final submissions, including a sealed, certified packet of my updated official military records that my attorney had subpoenaed directly from the Department of the Army. When court resumed, the silence in the room was absolute. Judge Vance adjusted her glasses, looked down at the paperwork, and then looked directly at Derek. The warmth completely drained from the room. "Mr. Thompson," Judge Vance began, her voice cutting through the silence like a razor blade. "You and your legal counsel have spent the last 2 days portraying this mother as a broken, incapacitated, and financially unstable individual who is a danger to her child. You have used her sacrifice for this nation as a weapon to achieve custody." Derek nodded eagerly, a smug smile forming on his face. "Yes, Your Honor, we just want what is physically safe for Liam." "Silence," Judge Vance snapped, slamming her gavel down so hard the wood echoed. Derek flinched, his smile instantly vanishing. The judge picked up a single page from my official military record jacket. "I have just reviewed the certified, unredacted addendum from the United States Army Medical Command and the Department of Veterans Affairs, dated exactly 2 months ago. I am going to read one single sentence from Sergeant First Class Maya Thompson's active record." Judge Vance cleared her throat and read aloud, "Following extraordinary neurological recovery, the veteran has been officially cleared with 0 cognitive or physical deficits obstructing daily life, has been awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for heroism, and holds a permanent federal trust fund of $1.2 million managed by the military for her child's lifelong security." Alongside her appointment as a remote tactical logistics consultant for the Pentagon, the courtroom went dead silent. Derek's face turned an absolute, ghostly shade of pale white. His mouth fell wide open, his eyes darting frantically toward his attorney, who was suddenly shuffling papers in absolute panic. "No, that's not possible," Derek stammered, his voice cracking loudly. She lives in a small house. She limps. She doesn't have that kind of money." "It is entirely possible, Mr. Thompson," Judge Vance said, her eyes burning with pure disgust. "While you were running away with your mistress and hiding your profits, this woman was being honored by the highest levels of our government. She chose to live modestly to teach her son humility, while her military trust grew exponentially. Furthermore, the Army forensic audit included in this record proves that the financial receipts you submitted for alleged cash child support are completely fraudulent, matching accounts you closed years ago." The judge didn't even hesitate. She leaned forward, her voice booming through the microphone. "This custody petition is denied with extreme prejudice. Sole legal and physical custody remains permanently with Maya Thompson. Furthermore, I am forwarding these records to the state prosecutor for immediate perjury and grand document fraud charges against you. Mr. Thompson, get out of my courtroom." Derek collapsed back into his chair, completely ruined, as 2 court bailiffs stepped up behind him. I stood up from the witness box, picked up my cane, and walked right past him without saying a single word. I went straight to the judge's chambers, opened the door, and pulled Liam into a tight, fierce hug. He looked up at me, saw the tears of victory in my eyes, and smiled. Derek thought my uniform and my injuries made me a target. He forgot that the military doesn't teach you how to give up. It teaches you how to win the war. I walked out of that courthouse holding my son's hand, leaving the ghost of my past exactly where he belonged, ruined, exposed, and completely defeated.